Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to crack open a scientific cold case that's been baffling researchers for more than 50 years. It's a mystery that begins not in a crime lab, but deep inside the human brain. And it all revolves around one simple, kind of mind-bending question.
So here it is. Does the human body actually manufacture its own psychedelic compounds? This simple, almost sci-fi question has driven decades of research, It sparked incredible excitement and some of the most intense scientific debate you can imagine. So let's meet the main suspects.
The investigation really focuses on this family of molecules, our primary suspects, DMT, HDMT, and 5-methoxy-DMT. They're all chemically related to tryptophan, that amino acid you get from food. The big question for investigators was, does our bodies sometimes take that basic building block and turn it into something else?
So what was the original lead? Why did scientists back in the 1950s even start looking for these compounds? Well, you might be surprised to hear that the hunt didn't begin with psychedelic exploration, but with a search for the very roots of mental illness.
The whole search was driven by this really compelling idea called the schizotoxin hypothesis. See, after observing the effects of drugs like LSD, some researchers started to wonder, what if schizophrenia wasn't a disease of the mind, but more of a metabolic error? Could the body be accidentally producing its own schizotoxin, a compound that created the symptoms of psychosis from the inside out?
But you know what? The theory just blew up from there. It quickly expanded way beyond a single illness. If the body could produce these powerful molecules, researchers realized they might hold the key to a whole range of human experiences. We're talking about the very fabric of altered states, dreams, near-death experiences, deep meditative states, and maybe even the spark of creativity itself. All of a sudden, the stakes were much, much higher.
All right, so let's jump into the early days of this investigation. In that first decade and a half, the first fingerprints started to appear. And honestly, it looked like the case was headed for a major breakthrough.
So the very first clue pops up in 1955, with a report of HDMT found in human urine. Then, throughout the 1960s, the leads just kept coming. A flurry of studies reported finding both DMT and HDMT, especially in patients with schizophrenia. By 1967, they were bringing in newer forensic tools like gas chromatography, a way to separate and identify chemicals to try and lock down the evidence. It really felt like the case was about to be cracked wide open.
This shows you just how much the forensic toolkit has changed. The early fingerprinting, think of it like chemical tie-dye. You're spotting chemicals on paper and just matching the color and position. It was revolutionary for its time, for sure, but it was also really prone to misidentification. Now, you contrast that with today's tools, like liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry, which are like a molecular scanner and a barcode scanner all rolled into one. They can identify a compound with near-perfect accuracy, and this massive leap in technology is absolutely central to where this case goes next.
So you'd think, right? Better tools, clearer evidence. But that is not what happened. Instead of getting a resolution, the entire investigation just descended into decades of confusion, dead ends, and totally conflicting reports.
Just look at the sheer amount of work that went into this. Between 1955 and 2010, researchers published a staggering 69 different studies trying to solve this mystery. 69 separate attempts to find these molecules in human blood, urine, and spinal fluid. The case file was getting seriously thick.
And this right here is the perfect snapshot of the problem. In 1961, one lab finds HDMT in all 5 patients they test. You'd think breakthrough, right? But in the exact same year, another lab tests 15 patients and finds nothing. 5 years later, another negative result. Then in 71, a positive one again. For every promising lead, there was an immediate dead end. It created this messy, contradictory, and deeply frustrating case file.
Yeah, the authors of the review paper that this whole explainer is based on, they summarize the chaos perfectly. They put it like this. This central conflict, some people finding higher concentrations, others finding nothing at all, it plagued the field for decades and just prevented any real scientific consensus.
Okay, so let's do what any modern detective would do with a cold case. We look at the original investigation itself. Why is this 55-year file so messy? Were the methods just flawed from the very start?
And when you look back, you can see a ton of problems. It seems like a lot of those early positive findings, well, they might have been compromised. The chemical tests, like we saw, were pretty imprecise. Researchers didn't always control for diet. There was a risk of lab contamination, creating false positives. But even beyond those mistakes, the investigators were up against a huge biological challenge. They were basically hunting a suspect that was just incredibly fast.
Yeah, see,
One of the biggest issues was that the body just metabolizes these molecules at an incredible speed. It's like trying to catch a ghost. These molecular suspects could appear and then just poof, disappear in a flash, often before the slower detection methods of the time even had a chance to register they were there.
So, this brings us to the final act of our story. This is where the most advanced technology is finally brought in to crack the case, and it reveals this really surprising and honestly deeply paradoxical twist.
And this is it. This is the core paradox of this entire 55-year investigation. As the scientific tools became more precise, more specific, and more sensitive, the signal actually got weaker. The detection of these supposed psychedelics became less and less frequent. And when they were found, it was at much, much lower concentrations than what was reported in those early explosive studies.
I mean, just look at the hard data from blood analysis. Across all the modern studies that looked for HDMT in blood, a surprisingly low 9% of all individuals, patients and controls combined, tested positive. For something that was once thought to be a key player in consciousness, that is an incredibly faint signal.
Now, the picture in urine, that tells a bit of a different story. Here, detection was way more common, but this created a whole new problem for the original theory. Sure, 71% of patients tested positive, but so did 55% of healthy controls. I mean, think about it. If pretty much everyone has it, that really throws a wrench in the whole idea that this is some kind of schizotoxin specifically linked to mental illness, right?
So where does that leave the case? After 55 years, we can't say for sure these molecules don't exist in the body. They may very well be there, but the evidence now suggests they're likely present at far lower concentrations than anyone originally believed. And that definitive link to schizophrenia or any other psychological state, well, that remains totally elusive.
And so the case isn't closed, but it is definitely gone cold. The hunt for our own inner psychedelics continues, and it's just this powerful reminder that the scientific process is almost never a straight line. More often than not, it's a long, complex, and utterly fascinating journey into the unknown, with plenty of mysteries still waiting to be solved.